Hi, welcome to the Time Capsule Show, where we explore the meaning of life in the 21st century through the eyes of people just like you and me. I'm Joenrhuz,
And I'm Monica.
and today we have Christopher Valdes, a current graduate student in California studying to be a medical physicist. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Of course, thanks for being here. So can you tell us more about yourself, about your, what you're studying over there in California?
So I was born in New York City, but raised in Bergen County, New Jersey. I attended St. John's University, where I got my bachelor's in physics. And now I'm a graduate student studying for my master's in medical physics at San Diego State University.
So how's it over there in San Diego? I've never been.
Right. Honestly speaking, it's absolutely beautiful. I didn't realize before moving to San Diego how kind of mountainous California really is. There are a bunch of hills and mountains all over the place, and that's how it pretty much looks like. Literally a bunch of mountains next to the beach, kind of. And also the weather here is absolutely gorgeous. It's usually sunny most days, if not all. But yeah, the weather's absolutely wonderful. I absolutely love it out here.
Yeah. So you mentioned the mountains. How about the beaches over there?
Oh, the beaches are absolutely gorgeous, of course, too. Especially on sunset. I never moved or I never been this far out west before because I was born and raised on the East Coast. So, seeing the sunset with the ocean in the background when late afternoon, early evening, it's absolutely gorgeous to just go for a walk on the beach. And now that the weather is nice, pretty much all day, every day, it's so nice to go outside and take a walk on the beach.
Oh man, lucky. I mean, that makes the best spot for Instagram pictures, Snapchat stories.
It really does. I really should be taking more of those.
So can you tell us more about, what you're studying in school?
Right. So I'm currently in a master's program for medical physics. So medical physics is basically the usage of physics in healthcare to both diagnose and treat diseases. It's most commonly used for things most people know about, such as MRI machines, CAT scan machines, ultrasounds, but we also use it to essentially treat cancer by targeting cancer cells and essentially causing them to essentially kill themselves so that patients can continue to live healthier lives.
Oh, is that like a long process to become a medical physicist? Is there more education after you finish your master's?
Right. So it's actually kind of a long process, not as long as becoming an actual doctor. So typically in order to get into medical physics, you have to get a bachelor's degree in physics or a related degree. And afterwards, you have to get your either a master's or a doctoral degree in medical physics from an accredited program. After you get that degree, you have to attend a residency program where they give you training within actual clinics or hospitals. And those are, of course, scattered throughout the US and Canada. And then once you complete that program, then you can continue on to working as a full-time physicist in a clinic or hospital.
Nice, nice.
It's really interesting, Chris. So, what inspired you to take on your profession or to pursue that field?
Well, I do come from a family of healthcare workers. My paternal grandma was a nurse, my mom's a nurse. I have a few cousins who are EMTs and another cousin who's a medical assistant. So healthcare has always been prominent in my family. So I knew that I wanted to do healthcare, but I also really loved physics. And I really liked how medical physics is in pretty much the perfect interface that combines my interests with the healthcare background that I essentially grew up with. So, and not only that, but unfortunately, I also lost my godfather to cancer on my 12th birthday. So that really inspired me to want to continue in this field when I found out about it.
Did you always like physics? Like at 5 years old, did you like tell yourself, I want to be a medical physicist?
No, absolutely not. I actually didn't find out about medical physics until I was a freshman in college. That's when I found out about the field. Before that, I was just mainly into science, like biology, chemistry, physics, anything science related, I was actually heavily interested in. It wasn't until college where I found out about physics or medical physics really, where I decided to essentially delve into that particular path instead of biology or chemistry.
Oh, is there also like a medical biology, medical chemistry degree out there?
I'm sure there is. It's just that, with this particular field, it's so broad. You know, for example, I've taken actually a radiation biology course for as a part of the degree curriculum, and it was like very heavily intensive on bio and less on physics. So, and my professor was explaining to us, yeah, this is basically like everything you need to know since you're going to be mainly physicists, and there's other um, career fields such as radiation biologists who really study into like the actual chemistry of it all and the actual components that go into it versus we're more concerned about what's going on a superficial level. So there are certainly many, many more fields that are related to it with more emphasis in biology and chemistry. It's just I chose the physics route.
So is that like similar to like astrophysics, or how is the math portion compared to medical and like astrophysics?
Right. So astrophysics is pretty theoretical in work. Like you see a lot of astrophysicists doing like calculations, but those are mainly what we call macroscopic in a way, like very big, versus the work that I'm doing is microscopic, very small, because we're working with DNA and cells, biology, and things around those lines. So we're essentially, the calculations in which we do for medical physicists pretty much calculates how much radiation are we going to give a patient. Are we going to give a little bit? Are we going to give a lot? And what are we giving the radiation for? Are we trying to image something? Are we trying to see something? Or are we trying to get rid of something? So we pretty much dedicate a lot of our time to doing these calculations on each individual patient, because of course, every patient's different. So it's a lot of emphasis on that, as well as making sure that the machines work properly to make sure they're actually working the way we want them to.
Well, so that's very interesting. That's like a whole new world into physics. I mean, I was a physics major in college and they didn't tell us about any of that. And for you to, take your degree to a whole nother level is just so extreme and just, it's like, wow, I'm speechless.
Yeah, it's actually a relatively new field. People were starting to get into diagnostic or therapeutic physics. Probably I want to say in like the 60s and 70s is when they first started it. So this is actually a very, very new field. And even as we speak, it's like it's constantly evolving. We take a class in radiation safety to make sure that what we're learning or what we do in the field is actually safe. And our professor openly told us, these safeties are probably going to change by next semester or within the next few years. So it's constantly evolving and very, very new.
So, with all that said, and, with all these different fields of physics that you mentioned, if you're pursuing a different path, completely outside of science, what would you be doing and why would you be doing it?
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting, honestly, because I do struggle with this question. However, I do want to say that I would be working in either like a scientific laboratory because I do a lot of research. It would either be something around working in a research laboratory or working as a translator in a hospital, because I do speak multiple languages and I'm currently learning a few more. So it's like I would definitely see myself working in that hospital setting as a translator.
That is so cool. Like, what languages are you fluent in?
Right. So obviously I speak English. I also speak Spanish and French. And I'm currently in the process of learning Mandarin, but unfortunately I haven't been able to really sit down and study it lately because of my schedule. But I speak a little bit of Mandarin and I can say some things in Tagalog, which is from the Philippines, and German and Japanese.
Oh, wow. So you know a whole set of languages. You're like Google Translate right there.
Oh, let's not get ahead of ourselves. But I would say I know how to say a few things and basic sentences in Tagalog, German, and Japanese, but I'm in no way fluent. I'm just like starting out with the baby structures. I'm just a little bit more advanced in Mandarin and fluent in Spanish and French.
Nice. Which one would you say is the hardest language that you've studied?
It would definitely have to be between Mandarin and Japanese, mainly because they're so different compared to Western languages such as English, Spanish, French. Like the grammatical structure, like writing it is a completely different story. It's significantly more complicated from a Westerner's point of view. So it would be between those two.
But yeah, you definitely make a point there. Like language in America, especially English, it's so hard to learn for like people outside of this country. And the one thing that I've always wondered is why do other languages have masculine and feminine words, but in America we don't. English doesn't have those, does it?
In English, generally, no. The only thing masculine and feminine in English is really like he, she, you know? Other than he, she, I can't really think of anything that's really masculine and feminine. But in Romance languages like Spanish and French, literally every single word or every noun has a gender. So it's like it's very complicated.
Right, it definitely complicated. And it's so fascinating. Like it's like the A's for feminine, O's for masculine, right?
Exactly, yeah. And there are some exceptions, of course, which is a whole different other story, but that's the general trend, you know. That's a reason why it's hard to learn a language because there are so many rules and exceptions you have to learn sometimes, and it just makes things more complicated.
Do you use Rosetta Stone to learn or any apps on your phone?
I actually use the app Duolingo, which is a lot of people learn. That's actually how I learned French. Um, I remember during my junior year of college, I would spend like 3 or 4 hours per day on Duolingo instead of studying, which was, you know. But anyway, yeah, I spent a lot of my time on Duolingo, especially with French and with Mandarin too. So that's how I personally learned my languages. But you know, there's a whole plethora of other options that people could use too.
Well, speaking of French, didn't you study in France for like a whole semester back in college?
Yeah, I did. It was kind of a study abroad thing. Like during the summer, I wasn't necessarily taking classes. I was just working in a research laboratory. So that was pretty much what we called an REU, which stands for Research Experience for Undergraduates. It's basically programs across the nation that offer research experience for students. So for my program, you know, most of them are actually in the US itself, but that program was special. It was located in France, in Paris specifically. So I had the opportunity to essentially live in France for 2 months, working in their laboratories and do research with them.
That is so cool. You're like Mr. Worldwide, seriously.
Thank you. I mean, I do think that it was a wonderful experience, don't get me wrong, but you know, I always tell myself that, you know, I did not expect to get accepted to that program because it is highly competitive, but here I am, I got accepted and I very much enjoyed myself when I was there. So it was just a risk that I essentially took and then I got rewarded.
Did you have a macaroon while you were there?
More than enough macaroons.
So speaking of which, we're on this segment that we like to call past, present, future. So how do
Mhm.
you see yourself now compared to 5 years ago?
5 years ago, I was a senior in high school, freshman in college, I believe. So with that being said, that time when I was in my life was not necessarily a happy, healthy time for me. It does have a bit of a dark history and not good, basically. And then I think about, you know, how far I've come and how many risks I've taken and what I've done to get to where I am today. And it just comes to show that even when you're down in the dumps and you're feeling bad about yourself, it will always get better, especially if you continue to take risks, make yourself vulnerable, put yourself out there. Life gets significantly better. And back then, I was living at home because I was 17 at the time with my parents, and now I live in California. So it's like my your trajectory in life when you're feeling that down about will always go up no matter what.
Well,
So
make
how do oh, sorry.
go ahead, go ahead.
No, I just want to know, how do you see yourself in 5 years?
Well, in 5 years, I do see myself entering or working in a PhD program. That's the current trajectory at this moment. However, that might change. I might actually end up in a residency program instead of a PhD, but we'll see. But I definitely do see myself progressing towards that goal of becoming a medical physicist and hopefully getting into that program that would essentially help me refine my skills.
So you mentioned that that you advise people to take risk, step out of your comfort zone, be vulnerable. What do you think holds people back from taking those risks?
You know, I honestly think that it has a lot to deal with the fact that people are scared of the unknown. You know, for many, many people, some people have never even been to college before. You know, I'm first generation to attend graduate school in my family. Uh, so therefore, you know, it was a very unknown realm for me, especially when my parents had no idea what it was like. So I think it's important to accept the fact that it is scary, don't get me wrong, but it's not life threatening or anything like that. So I think if people can essentially overcome their fear of the unknown and just go for it, take the risk, then you'll essentially be rewarded.
So I think this makes a great transition to our next question on our show, which is what principles do you live your life by?
Mhm. So I absolutely am an advocate for being kind to one another. You know, especially in times like today when you see people who are being so rude to each other, whether in customer service like Karens or whatnot. Um, I just remind myself all you have to do is to be nice to people. It's really not that hard. Like it's not. Just smile, wave, ask how someone's day is going, and it could really make a difference within a person's day or life in general, really. You know, I see that more common in California than I do in New York, actually, because, you know, people are definitely more to themselves or like very distant from one another in New York. But in California, you know, people are definitely more extroverted and I would say spread kindness more than not in New York. So I think that's step number one. And also, I also live by the fact to always challenge yourself and to always be curious. You know, we all have brains, and our brains actually very miraculous objects. So I would say it's awesome to use it, be curious, ask questions, because most species on our planet aren't able to do that. So I think it's a gift that we could all essentially use more.
Well, jumping off the New York thing, I definitely got to agree with you on that. Like, I swear to God, people will not say thank you if you hold the door for them over here.
Oh
And that,
yeah, that's definitely true. I remember I had a bit of a culture shock. Like when I first got landed in San Diego, I wanted to get Starbucks. And the barista was like, "Hi, how are you? How was your day?" And I was a little scared. And I was like, "Why are you asking me these questions? Like, I just want coffee." But then I realized I slowly but surely became more acclimated to life here. And it's just that, you know, people here are just like so much more nicer and like more open or whatnot. So that's just something that I noticed.
I mean, are you going to stay in the West Coast then because you love the culture there and the people there better than the East Coast?
Mhm. You know, I would absolutely love to stay in California in general. It's definitely some place that I would love to stay in permanently, but unfortunately, if I wanted to enter a residency program or a PhD program, you know, options in medical physics are extremely, extremely limited. There are only 40 universities in the entire continental US, or approximately around 40, that offer accredited programs in this field, and even more limited when you look strictly at doctorate programs. And so therefore, the chances of me having to leave California are high because options are extremely limited here. But if I had the opportunity to stay, and if I was given the option to stay, I would hands down do it. It's just, you know, with options and with the limitations of everything, it's just complicated.
So that jumps on our next point, Chris. What would you say you're grateful for?
Mhm. You know, there are honestly so many things that I'm grateful for at this point. You know, I'm so grateful for my friends and family who have supported me from day one, and my professors even who have got me to where I am. But so essentially, other than the people in my life, I would like to essentially place more emphasis on my parents. My mom and dad are essentially the ones who got me here. They are the ones who helped pay for my education and get me to this point. So I'm eternally grateful for all of their help and support, as well as the people around me.
What would your advice be, to people who don't see that same value in their family and don't appreciate, their parents, the sacrifices that their loved ones make for
Mhm.
them?
Right. Well, I definitely have to. Obviously, everybody's situation is completely different. That's just how life is. But with that being said, I would recommend to take a look at what your own values are and what you want out of life. we're all put on this planet for whatever reason, so we might as well make the most of it, and we have to do whatever it takes that makes us happy. I would highly recommend people who if they don't have as good of a support system, to chase their dreams, follow what makes them happy, and really pursue that particular happiness, no matter where it takes them.
Well, I think that was a perfect segue to our part of the show where the question is very similar to the title of this question of the show, Time Capsule. So I have to ask you, if you were to leave something in a time capsule for people to dig up 100 years later, what would you put in there and why?
You know, I thought about this, and I could think of like materialistic objects such as like a necklace or things around those lines. But honestly speaking, I genuinely think pictures. Everybody knows that a picture speaks 1,000 words at this point. And I feel as if by just looking at a picture of, of whatever, or of a particular moment in life or a historical monument, I feel as if that would essentially communicate within itself the stories of that monument, of what it actually looked like in person. Like the little Polaroid pictures that could essentially print out. I feel it's like a bunch of those of everything that's going on in the world, and famous landmarks would be the perfect thing to put there.
Do you have one of those Polaroid cameras?
I don't actually, because I can't afford one at the moment, but I would definitely get one eventually to take more pictures of what I'm seeing, because it's absolutely wonderful.
100%. I feel like those are the best things you can use to, take down memories, put them in a scrapbook, look at them 10 years later. I think that's one of like the best feelings in the world.
Yeah, I remember my grandparents actually had a scrapbook like that with some of my, essentially ancestors at the time, like my great grandfather, who essentially immigrated from Spain to Puerto Rico. So I think it's very fascinating that we're able to see that through pictures.
So like the pictures that you put in the time capsule, would you write a note in the back of the picture like, oh, today I went to Mount Rushmore, February 1st, 2021?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I think it would be helpful to like show people, like, or actually tell them what it actually is. But I think has to be more of an emphasis on what you're seeing rather than the message behind them, because we see with our eyes, and while it's important to obviously know what it's looking at, it's different when you actually see the actual particular thing instead of just reading about it.
That's so true, especially when it comes to photos. Like everything's always changing. I mean, look at the world we're living in now. Like who would have imagined that we would have a world where everyone needs to wear a face mask like anywhere in the whole world, as opposed to, just less than 2 years ago where we had a normal functioning world where we can socially gather and just, be normal, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that's another thing to take into consideration too. Like things can change very quickly in a matter of months or less than a year, as we saw with this pandemic. So I think by essentially, like for example, with the picture of like people wearing masks, that's how it is. That's how life is, or at the current moment, that's how it is. And I think it helps people to be grateful for the fact that we're slowly but surely getting through it, and we can finally eventually move forward with it.
Most definitely. So, Chris, is there anything that you'd like to leave our viewers? Any advice or anything to add?
Well, I do want to say to those people who are in STEM, uh, it is a hard field to enter. Don't get me wrong, but believe me when I say this, you can do it. It is a very rewarding field, and especially if you're interested in medical physics, it's so rewarding to see how you're essentially putting all of your time and effort into something that will essentially make someone's life a little better at the end of the day. So even though it's rough, and it's going to be rough, you can do it, and I believe in you.
Oh, that's wonderful. So all you STEM people out there, you got to follow Chris and Chris's
Follow his journey.
So, Chris, thank you so much for being on our time capsule show. We had a wonderful time with you. No pun intended.
Thank you so much for having me again.
So everyone tune in next week for another amazing addition to our time capsule. And if you want, if Chris leaves his social media, you can go follow him. and like
See
and
you next
subscribe.
week. Bye.